having me. So, students, I was in your seats, believe it or not, when I was a senior at Brockport. I actually used to talk to the intro to the university classes about what it was like to be a transfer. So the concept is winning at the game of college. And I have this short slide presentation for you, and I'm looking forward to sharing what I've learned over 40 plus years in academia. So if we could go to the next slide. So my game plan for today is the opportunity to give back and why I wanted to do that and how this opportunity presented itself, to hopefully a fresh perspective and understanding my why. And if we can go to the next slide. So having been in academia, I feel like it's now purgatory from the standpoint of I've spent more time in academia than anything else in my life. And so I break it down to gamers and gamblers. And most college students, when they come in, they're a gambler. And that means understanding I've spent a lot of money for college, and how do I measure if I'm getting my value back out? So if we go to the next slide. I can't, since I want to create the opportunity of this is college and what I'm going to talk about, might as well start with a quiz. So in this pop quiz, I've got 5 general questions that I will talk about. And then we'll talk about how I believe most people are gamblers. So the next slide. So I would argue that most people sit in the same seat most days in the classroom. That is very much a gambler mentality, that you come to class, you think I'm just going to get in, get out, get what I need, and move on. And part of the problem with that is you're missing an opportunity to know your classmates. If you want to have fun, take someone else's seat and watch their face when you come, even though you don't have assigned seats, and you'll get some discussion going. Then the next question is do you ask questions in class? And I would argue most of you have been in a class where you chose not to ask any questions and leave. You don't realize when you do that, not only are you cheating yourself, you're cheating all your classmates, because somebody had a question, they didn't ask it, it would make it more interesting. Plus, you would also help the professor in making his points and knowing that the class actually cares about their information. Have you seen your professor during office hours? And for most of you, the answer is only if I had to and if I was in trouble. And the problem with that is at some point, you're going to need letters of recommendation. And you're missing an opportunity to develop relations so the professor knows you more than just a student in their class. Are grades the most important result of a class? And the answer is no. It is important, but it's not the most important. And so think about it this way. As you go through college, you are going to do a paper, and say it's 10 pages or 15 pages or a 20-page paper. And you're going to get a grade, and then you're going to put it away and you think you're going to be done. And I would argue, if you would just spend another hour and a half, 2 hours, and change that paper to, I could turn it into a popular press article. I could turn it into a presentation at a conference. I could come up with another deliverable besides what I got, which was a grade, solely a grade. In your major classes, what % of your classmates can you name? And hopefully, I bet right now, you guys would say maybe 10%. And especially as a first-year student, and the goal is, especially in your major classes, you're going to want to strive to at least 50 to 60% by the time you graduate. And the reason why that's so important is you don't know where these people are going and where they're going to be successful. And you need to be able to tie to them. And I use this example as my son, who happened to be one of my students, actually was hired by one of his classmates, and he's been working for that company now for 5 years. Had he not gotten a chance to show off his skills, the likelihood is that job never would have happened. So that's why it's important. Next slide, please. So I'm going to try and share some terms. And first is one you've probably heard of before, which is ROI, which is return on investment. And so you've made a substantial investment in college. And there are hard costs and soft costs. And so first we have to understand the difference between these two. So a hard cost is tuition, room and board. Not negotiable, you have them. Soft costs are, well, I'm taking 5 classes. This is the number of times they meet. This is the number of hours I'm committing. And that doesn't include the hours put towards homework or projects. And so those would be considered soft costs because not everybody puts in the same effort. And so that's why there's a variable with that. Now, a term which may be new to most of you, which is ROO, which is return on objectives. So the objective is I want to get good grades. Now the question is are we defining what good grades are? I want to have a GPA above 3.0. Okay. Extracurricular activities. Well, what do those look like? And how are they helping you? So example, when I was at Brockport, I ran track and I wrote for the school paper and I was an RA. And those were additional things that I could put on my resume of other things that I accomplished. Now, a degree. But another objective is you now have alumni coming to speak to you, or in class, your professor brings in a speaker. A lot of you will, well, that was great, and you participate, but then when the speaker is over, how many of you will go and ask for that person's business card or connect with them? And that's the difference between a gambler and a gamer. A gamer is looking for those opportunities because they're looking to separate themselves from everybody else. A gambler is like, well, yeah, it's not that important to me. Maybe the whole purpose of ROO is I want to find ways of differentiating myself, and how do you gain experience? So if we can move to the next slide. My suggestion, if you're really looking for success, is being part of something bigger than yourself. Dream big, set goals, take action. So when I finished my academic career at Brockport, one of the things I decided to do was I was going to run, and at the time they had the Empire State Games, but the only open event they had was the marathon. So I was a 400, 800 meter runner, and I went to my coach, who I'm still in touch with, who still lives in Brockport. And funny, I just talked to him last week. But I told him I wanted to run a marathon, and he's like, okay, I'm going to set you up with another alum. And that was great. And he said, well, what's your goal? And I said, well, I'm going to break 3 hours. And he was like, you know, Peter, most people set a goal to finish. And I said, how long have you coached me? And he kind of laughed. He said, okay. So I ran the Empire State Games. I wound up running 3 hours and 1 minute. And I was like, well, I'm not satisfied. So I ran another marathon 8 weeks later. This was, this point, Skylon, which was Buffalo to Canada. and ran across a Peace Bridge, really cool, and wound up running 3:02. And I'm like, still not satisfied. So another 8 weeks later, December 5th, I ran another marathon in Atlantic City and wound up running 2:59:35. So again, I set goals, I took action. And so the goal is to do something big. So if we move to the next slide, I'll give you an idea of what other big things that kind of created. So for example, at the age of 59, I decided I was going to bike from downtown Cincinnati and the Freedom Museum to Montgomery, Alabama, which was 625 miles away, and ride to the Freedom Rides Museum in Montgomery, Alabama. So did 625 miles, averaged 18 miles an hour, climbed 40,000 feet with two other gentlemen. One was 24, the other was 36. And every night I was giving presentations to boys and girls clubs and YMCAs on the importance of legacy. And again, it was a great experience. Glad I did it. The next picture on the right is my sales and fundraising class. Now, I got this class started in 2008. And when I first started this class, the goal was to raise $1,000, each person in the class, and no one hit it. Now, 16 years later, the goal is $1,500. This class last year raised $60,000 in one semester. We also worked with Special Wish, where we funded 6 students Special Wish. And again, these kids didn't even know these people, but they were doing something bigger than themselves. And again, it's been a life-changing experience, not only for me, but for my students. So we move to the next slide. It's critical we don't forget to say thank you. So even how this presentation took place was from something else that I did. Believe it or not, Brockport wasn't looking for me or to bring me back in the fold. I happened to write a thank you note. So if you move to the next slide. So I wrote this thank you note, a belated 40-year-old thank you note to SUNY Brockport. And I wound up getting it published in a book. And part of it was, as I look back at this point in my career, I wanted to thank Brockport for accepting me as a student. Something you don't know about me, I happen to be dyslexic. And so when I wrote this note of gratitude, I sent it to 3 people at Brockport who weren't there when I was there, but the offices were the offices. And I sent it to the president, I sent it to the communications department, and I sent it to student support services. And in 1979, when I became a student, they didn't have a lot of colleges that were supporting people who learn differently. But Brockport was willing to at least give it a shot. And so I was able to have oral exams, and I got students to take notes for me. And that helped me get through the experience. Now, were the professors thrilled to do this? They were willing, and that's all I needed. And so part of it was, when I went through this experience, they didn't have anyone to compare me to. So when I took an oral exam, the only person that the professor could compare me to was them. And so I wound up getting B's on a lot of my exams. And I learned not to take that personally, it was like I needed the degree, and this is how it was important to be able to demonstrate my knowledge, even if it wasn't like everybody else. So I wanted to let Brockport know some of the success I enjoyed. So if you go to the next slide. So not only did I attend Brockport and the Ohio State University and Temple University, but during my journey, I happened to have an opportunity to be at a conference in New York City, and I met this person at the conference, and they were going to be presenting to the same group I was, and they asked about the group because they hadn't presented yet, and they knew I had in the morning, and they asked, and I gave them some information, and I said, oh, by the way, I'm working on this story, and I was wondering who I could talk to at USA Today. And she was gracious enough to give me a lead. And so I wound up writing an op-ed piece for USA Today on learning disabilities and how, with student athletes and the 13 core classes that they have to take, that it's really against the American Disability Act, because they are looking at everybody as group data, and the American Disability Act stresses that you have to treat everyone as an individual. Well, this woman, a year later, is doing research and found my article, and just so happens they're suing the NCAA because their son was a swimmer and only had taken 12 of the 13 core classes, and the NCAA was saying they're not eligible. And they said, well, we're going to do this story in the Chicago Sun-Times. And I said, yeah, I wouldn't do that. And they go, what do you mean? I go, well, it's a great regional paper, but that's not what you want to do. I said, if you want to get the NCAA's attention, you're going to have to go bigger than that. So they went to the Washington Times. And so this story blew up. They get a call from Good Morning America. And Good Morning America says, well, this is great. We'd love to do a story, but we're having a problem. We can't get any coaches to say anything bad about the NCAA. Would you be willing to go on national television? And I said, sure. And I said, I'm not saying anything bad about the NCAA. I'm just saying this is what the information is. So I'm on Good Morning America. They fly me into New York City, and I'm being interviewed by Charlie Gibson. And Charlie Gibson goes to introduce me and says, well, we have with us today Dr. Peter Titlebaum from Tulane University, where I was the professor at the time, who had a learning disability. And I looked over at him, I go, nope, still do. He was not happy with me correcting him, but I said that was part of the issue with having a learning disability. It looks differently for everybody, and it's not something that you can quantify. You know, here I am as a college professor. I've written 60 academic articles. I've written over 100 popular press articles. I've presented over 200 times. So I've been able to do very well in regards to being able to lean into and demonstrating that I can be successful with a learning disability. So I wanted Brockport to know that they helped move me in that direction. Something also happened, and if you go to the next slide, I also happened to be a character, so to speak, and I had a roommate, and his name was Bob T. Deer. It was Bob, actually a Deerhead, and I brought him to graduation. Now, the reason why this is significant is this is why you can't bring anything into the stadium at Brockport because of me. So I wanted my parents to be able to find me amongst 3,000 students. They had no trouble. However, Brockport did have an issue with it, and it was not done to insult. It was more to celebrate. So with the next slide. So ready or not, I'm ready for questions, and small questions lead to small discoveries. Bigger questions lead to bigger So I really like to know where you guys are coming from at this point, and we'll go from there.
Thank you so much, Dr. Titlebaum. The Q&A is open, so students, if you have any interest, you can ask a question in the Q&A, and Dr. Titlebaum will be happy to respond. I know I have one question offhand
Sure.
for you.
Yeah.
What is one of your favorite memories about your time at Brockport? What sort of stands out to you?
You know, I think the willingness for Brockport to open itself up to me in letting me do what I had to do to get through school. So what you don't realize is when I transferred, they only accepted 8 credits for my first year in college. And I told myself, since I was paying for school, I wasn't going to be in college more than 4 years. So I carried 20 credits a semester so I could finish and do some summers and whatever. So I finished in 4 years. And to be able to do that, being an RA, doing the activities that I did, you know, that's what Brockport means to me, is I was allowed to be true to who I was. And that's why it's like, if you dream it and you can find people that will support you, you can do some really cool stuff.
Absolutely. I love that perspective. We did have a few questions come in from the open Q&A. First one here is, what advice can you give to a Brockport student who has a learning disability?
Well, it's always fascinating as a college professor. I'm fascinated because I don't know how it is at Brockport, but a lot of, to this day and age, there'll be a letter sent to the professor saying you have a learning disability. And for me, that's like, you think you get a get out of jail card, but you don't have the confidence to be your own advocate, to talk to the professor during their office hours and saying, I want to explain how I learn best, and this is what you could do to help me. And it would knock down some of the resistance that you may feel that you're getting, because you need to be your own advocate. And that a lot of students think they don't have to or shouldn't have to. And I'm like, look, it's like extended time. Extended time, I don't think I think all my students can have extended time. I don't see it as an advantage, because if you don't need the extended time, it's not a big deal and you're not going to use it anyhow. So I make all my exams extended time, because I'm not going to. So everybody has been given that opportunity in my world. But again, I try and explain, well, how do you learn? What is it that you need? When you can't have those conversations, now you're making an assumption that the professor's a mind reader and they know how to help you. I'm like, they don't.
Yeah.
You know, part of it is I wrote an article years ago about the dyslexic advantage. When we think of our senses, if somebody's blind, what happens to their other senses? They become keener. So I look at it, if somebody's dyslexic, God gave them something else. So my joke is, I'm the master of the obvious. I may not be as smart as everybody, but I see things that not everybody else does. And when I tell my students, I may not be your smartest college professor, but you're not going to find someone who's going to outwork me. So I know what I lean into, I'm really good at. So I want to know, as the person who has a learning disability, what is your superpower? How can you make the class better because you bring something else to the dance, so to speak?
I love that perspective. And I would also add, that self-advocacy, it bleeds into so many other areas of your life, when you really start developing that skill. And so college is a great opportunity to start that whole process of being a self-advocate and being there for yourself.
Well, that goes with saying, it's funny, like, you have people in this class and their goal is to be this job or this major. And it's like, look, I've been doing this long enough to tell you, whether you want to hear it or not, today, national average, you are going to have 3 to 5 careers, 12 to 14 jobs.
Yeah.
So this is for now, not forever. So being able to pivot, and so we do a bit a gross injustice to students, and you've all been asked this question: tell me what you want to be when you grow up. It's a terrible question.
It is.
What the question we should be asking is can you tell me the 3 skills you want to use every day? Notice I didn't talk about how much money you want to make. Tell me the 3 skills. Because now all of a sudden, as long as I'm using those skills, I'm going to be happy.
Yeah.
So again, it's a different perspective because I know things are going to change. It's not an if, it's a when.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Our next question is, why did you pick Brockport?
I didn't. I transferred there. And that was a whole different experience. To be honest, my sister was getting her master's there. My brother was there. And so there was a comfort level of going there. I kind of got gifted my sister's advisor. So she introduced me to his advisor. And even after she left, I would still periodically go visit him. And we would just talk about stuff, and he knew enough about the university and could give me information. And so to have a mentor who was in the system made navigating it so much easier because he knew the players, even though he was a graduate education. And so it was just a really warm feeling that I knew I could talk to 2 of her former teachers would be like, oh, sure, come on in, Peter. Like I was part of the family. So that made, and I learned to develop relationships with, I mean, the fact that I'm still in touch with my old track coach or classmates to this day tells you what Brockport still means to me.
Right. Thank you. Someone is asking, what classes do you teach as a professor?
They're still trying to figure that out. But I teach sports management. I teach practicum, which is resumes, cover letters, mock interviews, how to prep for getting a job. In that class, believe it or not, there's over 30 assignments. I mean, I make it like it's getting a job. And they have to get 20 contacts during that class. I bring in people to do mock interviews. They're competing against their own classmates. I'm like, you're going to learn this skill. I also teach a sales and fundraising class. I teach a sports marketing class. And I also teach the senior seminar before they get out. This is what you're going to find. This is what reality is. And I get this chance to say, you know, you do the old ask, how many of you think you're going to go to grad school? And some of you are like, I'm not going to grad school, and I'm in your corner. And I swore I was never going into college. And once I finished my undergrad, I was done. Until someone said, if you want this next job, you need this piece of paper.
Right.
And then it's like, I guess I miscalculated. I guess I'm going to get my master's. And then it was like, well, if you really want the job you really want, you're going to have to get your doctorate. So I only did it to get the job that I wanted. But I'm telling you, don't hide in graduate school. Go because you need the job that they're telling you this is a requirement for that job.
Yes. No, that's very good advice. Our next question is, what would you say to a student who is having trouble adjusting to the college lifestyle, and how do they gain a gamer mindset?
You know, part of it is when we're not sure, understanding your motivation. So you came to college and you said, I'm doing this because, and there was a reason. I thought I needed this. I wanted to get this for this job or this field or whatever. I'm a very big proponent of, because I'm dyslexic, I work backwards. Okay. And so like, what do you mean you work backwards? So I want to know where it is you want to wind up. Okay. So if we have a plan of saying, well, I want to be blank job, Okay, have you looked at a job description for that job? Do you know what publications those people read? Do you know what conferences do they attend? Do you know anybody that, do you know the salary range? So I do this assignment when in my intro class, and you'll be like, well, this is crazy that you're doing to this. So I say, you have to pick 5 jobs. I don't care what the jobs are. You have to pick 5. And you rank them for what you know right now, as this would be my first choice, second, third, fourth, fifth. Like, okay, that's great. Now you have to do a 1-page paper on each job, knowing the trends, knowing what money you can make, knowing what, do you need a graduate degree, all the general information. So now you're at least more knowledgeable. But you also have to look at it through 5 lenses, 5 jobs, 5 lenses. And I say, well, fine, give me 5 variables. I'm like, well, like, what's a variable? It could be salary. It could be further education. It could be travel. It could be, well, I don't know what your 5 variables are, but I know you have to have the same 5 variables and look at each job through that lens. Then go back and re-rank. And you're like, okay, so now your number 1 job is maybe now number 4 because you just did some homework. So I get blamed for ruining their dream. And I'm like, no, you did due diligence and you found out it wasn't for you. So then we've got it down to 2 jobs. I said, okay, great. Now you got to contact 3 people who have those 2 jobs. I said, because they can share insight if you're on the right track. We all assume that you know what you want to do. And I assume that you have this idea, but you haven't done any homework. And I want you to do the homework. So that's the second. So now they've done that. So they've done the first paper on the 5 jobs and the 5 variables. Then the second job is now they have to get 6 contacts and then do a summary. The last paper I have them do, and this again, this is in an intro class. I now say, now find an entry-level job or an internship for a position that would lead to what you think you want. Because you've done this now, you've done some research. I'm like, okay, fine. Now, what are you doing in the next 3.5 years, as where you guys are at this point in college? What's your resume going to look like in 3.5 years? And where are you going to get those experiences? Because it can't be from class. You're only going to get a limited stuff from class. So I'm going to be like, well, I want to work events. Great. So I'm going to work the something at the War Memorial. I'm going to work at NCAA championship. I'm going to work a trade show. I'm going to, and figure out where those are and saying, yeah, this isn't negotiable. These are the skills that are in that job posting that you have any shot at getting this job. Because you got to understand, once you have a job description, they're going to get 90% of everything on that list. So you now have 3.5 years to go get it. And you're like, but I'm not sure. I'm like, yeah, guess what? You have to make a decision and you go down that road until that road is no longer what you want. And then you have to try again. Yes. But not deciding is also a decision. And that means you're not getting closer to anything. So I'm trying to push them to make a decision and saying, let's try this on for now. And then let's see where we want to go.
I love that approach. I think that really helps someone to crystallize their, their determination and then what they actually want out of their lives, taking those steps. I think that's brilliant. Yeah.
Well, it's like when we ask the question, do you want to be great? I guarantee you everyone's going to say yes. Like, yeah, okay. Do you want to pay the price to be great? Right. There's a price to be paid. This isn't just an option. I outwork people. That's why I've gotten the opportunities that I've gotten. Not because I'm smarter than them, because I outwork people. So, and I'm not saying I'm not smart. What I'm saying is I've got to understand and lean into what I'm good at. And I look at things differently, and I'm going to turn that in to get something else out of that experience. That's what I'm trying to get you guys to think like.
Thank you so much for that. Our next question here, you talked about how someone said, it was Charlie Gibson, said you had a learning disability and you responded that you still have one. What are other areas of your life outside of academia where your learning disability has challenged you?
So, I had to listen to all my textbooks. Okay. And the only way I could listen to a textbook, believe it or not, you could get a tape recorder, variable speed tape recorder from the Library of the Blind. And they would send you, and then you'd have to try and get textbooks, and that's back in the day. However, I can listen to things at a faster speed than most people. So I can listen at 1.75 speed, which if my wife were to hear, go, how are you even comprehending that? And that to me is just like a normal, because I had to use my time more efficiently. So I listen to books to this day, and I probably go through a book a week, because I'm constantly putting something good in my mind.
Yeah.
I don't do real well with superficial. I want to go deep, and I want to talk about big stuff, and I want to have big goals. And I'm just like, well, because you're old, I'm like, no, I'm still setting goals. So example, I work out every day. I am in the pool, believe it or not, at 5 a.m. during the week and 6 a.m. on the weekends. And I swim for 90 minutes. It's not negotiable. So if you have a goal and work towards your goal. And so I don't think I'm special. I think I can do it. So what is it that you want to do or achieve that you think is worthwhile? Then what are you working towards?
Yeah.
So if I still have to do it at soon to be 64, what are you guys waiting for?
Definitely. Our next question here is, how and when did you know what you wanted to do with your career?
It's a great question. I always thought I was going into sales. Guess what? I'm in sales. I'm just doing it differently than what I intended. When I finished college, I realized I could coach. So I had run for 4 years. I wanted to coach. I had a great experience. I coached in Rochester at Fairport High School. It was a great experience. We won 2 sectional titles. I was coach of the year. I'm like, I want to do this. This is what I was born to do. And then I got my master's and worked at Ohio State and had a graduate assistantship and got some coaching, and that was great. Thought, well, I'm going to continue this. And then I couldn't get arrested to be a coach. It was like that wasn't happening. And so while I had success, it was like, well, and my goal, believe it or not, was to be a Division III coach. Like most people, like Division I. I go, no, I've already coached elite athletes. I know this is where I belong. And so I started. So when I went to my first teaching job was at Tulane, and I got a chance to work with the team, and it was great. And we won a championship. It's like, oh, this is great. But there was no money in it. I now have kids and family, and it's like, okay. So the only difference for me between teaching and coaching is I don't mess with people's bodies.
Yeah.
It's the only difference. I am still messing with their heads. I'm still goal setting. I'm still trying to achieve stuff with my students and push them. I believe everybody should be uncomfortable every day. Some way, shape, or form, you should be uncomfortable. That's when you grow. So I make my students uncomfortable. I make myself uncomfortable, so why shouldn't they be?
Right.
And so, see, when you're uncomfortable, that's when learning takes place.
Yeah.
So I've learned to embrace it as opposed to, ooh, this is really hard. It's like, this is when it gets fun. This is when it gets interesting, and to see what you are capable of. So I'm still trying to figure out what I'm capable of. So that's how I morphed into being a college professor. I went from getting my doctorate and then saying, oh, this is how you do this. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. And I was at Tulane for 3 years, and now I've been at UD for 28. And I will tell the students, I love going to work. I love going home, but I love going to work. That's what I want for you. But if you don't do the career exploration, you're not going to know that you will. And, this is my happy place. I jokingly tell my students in my classroom, I do stand up, and in my office, I do teaching.
Yes.
Because you can't hide in my office.
Right.
But you can pretend I'm not calling on you. And I find ways to get everyone to participate in class. So if I had been in person, trust me, you all would have been speaking at some point in this presentation.
Excellent. Our next question, did you ever feel like an outcast in your class because of your disability?
I guess the question, outcast, I've been an outcast my whole life. I don't need to fit in. I like me. So it's kind of like, look, the way I am wired is I say things that are on my mind, which may make people feel uncomfortable. I make everyone feel uncomfortable. And I've embraced that. And it doesn't matter. They could be a college professor. I'm still asking questions. They don't really want to have that conversation. And it's like, look, I just want to learn. And if that means I'm asking the tough questions, it's because I want to learn too. So does that mean people don't get emotional in my office? Oh, trust me, they do. But it's to get to a point. So I do this, I give you this example. So in my sales and fundraising class, I do this project where we have a philanthropy contest. And of course, the students are like, well, what's that? I said, you get 5 minutes to pitch a charity, head to head against another student. Class votes as soon as both of you go. Who gets to the next round? We get down to the final 4. I then say, we're going to do a videotape. We're going to send it to the judges, and they're going to go first, second, third, fourth. But we now give away, first prize is $3,000 to a kid's charity.
Wow.
Right. And we've raised $135,000. So talk about doing something bigger than yourself. So I had this student last year comes in and says, Doc, I'd like to talk to you about the charity I picked. I said, okay, fine. I want to do this. I'm making adoption more affordable, because she happened to have been adopted. And I said, isn't that your mom's charity? She goes, yeah. I said, yeah, I'm not feeling it. And she's like, what? I go, yeah. I said, how about the fact that you've been adopted? You'll never be able to fill out a family medical history. You don't know if you have a sibling. And all the people who have been adopted at some point would really benefit from talking to somebody. And the parents who adopted somebody would benefit from, you don't know the issues that your children are dealing with because you've never been adopted. And of course, I get the waterworks, but then she comes back, gets her presentation really tight. And when you get to the final 4, you get to send the video to the charity because they're now getting money. So she does this. And they come back and saying, we'd like you to come to our gala in Washington, D.C. and receive an award and present. Right, in front of 500 people. Okay, and this is a topic she didn't want to talk about. And now all of a sudden, this is her golden ticket, and she's found her voice. And now she's currently getting her MBA at Notre Dame.
That's amazing.
When you have that power to see, look, one person at a time, to say, my class learned more about each other in 3 weeks than any class I'll ever have. And everybody's got bad stuff in their life, and we don't know the person next to us and what they've dealt with. Yeah. And in this 3 weeks, they learn about that.
That is incredible. That is really an impressive story.
It's very cool that I've been able to do that, but that's coaching. And so I'm still the same coach at 22 as I am at soon to be 64. I'm still trying to pull this out of people, going, you are capable of these things.
That's excellent. Next question. How do you recommend studying for exams? What's worked for you?
Well, first, if any of you do an all-nighter, you didn't prepare. There's never a reason for you to do an all-nighter, and you're not going to retain the information even if you did it,
the next day after you take said test. So it is a process of how often do you review the information, being prepared for class, looking over information, talking to previous students who've taken the class and what those tests are like, or what their success was. It's, you are so much better off doing a little bit each day than procrastinating.
Yeah.
I tell people procrastination kills. And in my class, it's going to bury you. And I'm like, I'm not trying to be mean or a jerk. It's just like, I've got another agenda, stuff I want to do, and I'm building it off the other stuff. So you guys want to procrastinate and not think about it. Little chicken little, the sky is falling. I'm like, you're choosing to watch it fall. I know that I put it on the calendar. This isn't a surprise when these things are due.
Right.
So again, part of it is you have so much control that you give up. And I would ask, how much time are you watching NFL on Sunday? How much time are you playing video games? How much time are you watching YouTube? I'm not saying not to do those things. What I'm saying is you have to learn to manage your time.
Yeah.
You have to find time for everything.
Frequency over intensity, I think,
Yeah.
is the way to
Absolutely
reframe that. Yeah. Yeah.
Being the academic in you. I'm talking like a student. You're talking like an academic.
Our next question, what is your advice to sports management majors?
So the first thing, it's funny because it's one of those things that you're going to have to explain the rest of your life. Someone's going to go, I don't understand. Why were you a sports management? Did you just talk about sports? And I'm like, my kids will tell you, I don't talk about sports. Sorry, that's not what I'm like. You can put sport in front of every title: sport, marketing, sport, finance, sports, operations. Guys, all of those, you just pull the first word and like, oh, I wouldn't sign up for that. I know. So let's go back to, it's the business side of sports. It is a over $500 billion industry. And it's not just football, baseball, basketball, and hockey. That's actually less than 10% of the industry. So I have as many successful students that never worked a day in sports than I did at work in sports. Now, have I had people successful in sports? Absolutely. Actually, one of my former students from Tulane is the general manager of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Wow.
Okay, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But as soon as that happened, I contacted one of my other students who said, oh, Doc, I want you to know I'm going to be your first general manager at the pro level from Dayton, or, as one of my students. And I said, well, first has already happened, but you can do it the first from UD. And if you can do it before you turn 50, you will beat Omar when he did it. Like, just to tease him, like, if you said you want this, but be careful what you tell me, because I'm going to still throw that back up and saying, okay, are we still playing? And that's the whole point, is like, set goals, go after your goals, and have some fun with this.
Definitely. It's so much more about the skills and the mindset, and where you take them.
Part of it is when you talk about sports management. So I had a student who was working for the Blue Jackets for 10 years. He was a very successful salesperson, and he had 2 children, and his wife said, this isn't working for me. You're working nights and weekends. We have 2 kids. I'd like to see you. So he went into medical sales. He makes twice as much.
Yeah.
So again, it's transitioning the skills, not this isn't forever. It's for now.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Our last question here is, how do you suggest someone who has a learning disability boost their learning? In this case, it's a student with dyslexia, but generally as well.
Well, first, it's funny when someone says dyslexia, they may not understand that everyone's dyslexia is different than each other.
Yeah.
So how I learn and how you learn may not work. So what I've been able to do is come up with my own system that works for me. So it was funny, when I was in college, I would, first they used to make, and they probably still do, at RIT, they used to make NCR paper. which was no carbon required. So
Yep.
I could ask a student to take notes, and I was actually doing them a favor. And you're like, I don't understand. Well, you have to look at how I reframe. If you knew somebody was counting on your notes, would you do a good job? And the answer is yeah. So they would take good notes. They would take the first copy. I would get the second copy. Then I would either have a friend or I would read the notes out loud and record it. Then I would follow along, and then I would highlight the notes, and that would be how I would help get that information into my head. You know, it's when you have a genuine interest in whatever it is. So if you wanted to become an expert, what would you do? And it's like, I don't care, you'd find a way. So you're like, well, I'm going to read about it, I'm going to hear about it, I'm going to find out who's talking about it, but I'm going to become an expert in that topic. And I'm sure you're all familiar with the concept of 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours is 10 years. And it takes 10 years to be great at anything. So how much time are you putting into your study habits, your style, your way of learning to say, I've got a system? And you've got to figure out, the question I would prefer you ask is, how do you learn best? So, and an easy way to get to that point is, think about it this way. If you had to get directions to someplace, how would you like to be told how to do it? Do you want them to show you a graph, make a chart, tell you, draw it for you? How do you want that? You're understanding that you have a way that you prefer to get information in your head. Use that simple example to go, oh, I prefer these things work for me. Then it's like, well, now how do you adjust that for all your lessons and say, I know how I learn. I know how I can get this stuff done. And that's borrowing stuff that you already know, you just haven't applied it in the same way and saying, I need to identify my learning style. So
Absolutely.
hopefully this was helpful.
Very helpful, very insightful, and we are just so grateful for you joining us today, Dr. Titlebaum. This was a pleasure, and I hope that we will be able to have you here at Brockport again in the near future. Give you the whole Golden Eagle welcome.
I would appreciate it. That'd be wonderful.
Excellent. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm sure this is, going to be helpful for you as you continue your first semester here at Brockport. As always, if you have any questions, if there's anything you want us to, coach you on ourselves, come on over to the Academic Success Center. We are more than happy to help you. And with that, we'll close things up. Thank you again, Dr. Titlebaum.
Go Eagles.
Go Eagles.